Hey folks, this is Rabble Rousing Rich Bergeron.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Tornado Tony Pennicamp.
And Psychic Tom Doug. Ready to make predictions.
Yeah, it's funny, we mentioned this last week. I hope we didn't jinx him, but Riddick Bowe has been pulled out of his fight with Lamar Odom. So, I don't know. I don't know who he's going to fight next. Lamar, I guess they need a stand-in, so I'm thinking about it. But
Yeah.
Tom wants me to push for Riddick.
Rich, when they said, they were going to put you in there instead, I was like, no, you got to wait for Riddick Bowe.
Yeah.
He's the one that called you out.
Yeah.
But, to be honest, when I saw that post, I was relieved. I mean, I'm not bullshitting you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about it today when,
I put a Facebook post out on it saying I hope
workout.
it doesn't happen. I was one of many other people, I guess, who was outraged about it.
I mean, I was thinking about, Riddick Bowe, earlier, and I was thinking about his career. And I watched his career, shortly after he came out of the Olympics, training with Eddie Futch, and very charismatic guy. And Eddie Futch used to say to him, don't try to be a second-class Muhammad Ali, be a first-class Riddick Bowe. Don't try to do all the Ali-isms. Make your own identity. And Riddick Bowe can fight. There's no getting around that. Sometimes he had a lazy streak, and that was one of his issues. But like I said, I remember the fights with Holyfield. The first fight was a war of attrition, and he won. Second fight, he didn't come in good shape. Holyfield did, and Holyfield won. The third fight, even though he got knocked down, that was one of those nights where Holyfield was like Jekyll and Hyde off and on, and it was one of his off nights.
Right.
And, Bowe won, and that's what put him into those Galata fights. But one of the things you always say about Riddick Bowe, his career was always marred with some kind of controversy. We talked last week about that thing with Elijah Tillery, before he was even champion of the world. Where the whole big thing with Rock Newman broke in. Then the throwing the title in the garbage. Fan man, you can't attribute to him because that wasn't his fault. But you always...
He said it was a conspiracy.
Other instances, you had... I was at a fight
in our interview.
Who did he fight the one time? Buster Mathis Jr. I was there in Atlantic City. He knocked him out when Mathis was on his knees. It was a no contest. Always was something, right? When he had those Galata fights, the first one, it was attributed. Okay, he took him lightly. He didn't come in shape, and he was taking a beating. But he got the lucky for the disqualification. Next thing you know, his thugs are starting a melee, which really put a damning effect on it. So now it's coming up to the rematch like 6 months later, and Bowe's going to be in shape. He was 10 pounds lighter, But you looked at him at the weigh-in, and you're like, yeah, he's 10 pounds lighter, but he looks emaciated. Yeah. And when that fight was over, and he won again by disqualification, but I think he took a worse beating in the second fight. And that second knockdown he took was especially punishing, where you could tell he was definitely concussed. And they were interviewing him, and I remember watching that interview and saying, he should never fight again. I mean, he sounded like a guy that just drank a fifth of Jack Daniels. and he did for about probably 5 years afterwards, maybe even longer than that. And then he was talking about a comeback, and I was like, I don't know if I really like this. But he came back, and, he had a win here, like against a nobody. And his second fight, it was, I forget the name of the guy he was fighting. Shorter guy, little heavy set. And it was a fight, a prime Riddick Bowe demolished this guy in 90 seconds. So the guy was tough. And, Bowe, I think, might even put him down in the first round. But by the fourth and fifth and sixth rounds, I'm wincing because Bowe's taking a lot of clean headshots, especially against the ropes. And I'm like, this isn't good. And I saw him, like I said, we interviewed him probably almost 10 years ago. And he did not
years
sound
ago.
good on that interview at all. It was 9 years ago, yeah.
Which is funny because you just posted the Rocky Marciano thing from 9 years ago. And it was crazy because during the interview, we discussed how we just recently interviewed Ray Mercer and Roy Jones Jr., like within a month of each other. So crazy.
And that was it was like the 88 Olympic medalist.
Yeah.
I
specifically took time out to make sure you asked the question about that. And the thing about Holyfield that ties into this discussion, for the segue, is he actually was trying to get us to set up the rematch with Holyfield for the fourth fight during the interview.
I remember that.
It was great.
One of the things I said about this is when we talked, because we said we had 3 Olympic medalists back to back to back, and I say 2 gold medalists in Mercer and Jones, and a silver medalist in Bowe. And I remember when we interviewed Roy Jones, Jones had a couple really devastating knockouts. The fight with Tarver, the fight with Glenn Johnson. He'd been knocked out a couple times, and sharp as a tack.
Oh my God, so fast.
And then you have Riddick Bowe in there.
Him and Matt Usyk would put the maximum, if they ever got together and talked to each other, oh my God, you'd need the Micro Machines guy to get a faster talker than them two. But those are probably the 2 fastest talking people I've ever interviewed. Roy Jones not only boxes fast, but he talks fast. But the funniest part of the Riddick Bowe interview was when I asked him my standard question, how do you get into fighting in the first place? And Riddick Bowe proceeds to tell us a story of when he was in school and somebody decided to show a Joe Frazier video or something, and the guy really liked Joe Frazier, and he said, Muhammad Ali is a faggot, and if you like Muhammad Ali, you're a faggot too. So apparently Riddick Bowe took such offense to this. He liked Ali so much that he beat the guy up, and then the teacher was the one that signed him up for boxing. So that was the whole incident that got him into fighting. And I remember too, we asked Roy Jones Jr. when his first fight was. We kind of posed it a little differently, and it took him a minute to tell the story, but I think he said he got into a fight with some kid in school, and it started that way for him. It was almost like exactly similar to how Rocky Marciano's first fight happened, according to all of his biographers. So, it's just such a commonality among them. Somebody gets bullied at some point, it always develops almost the same way for almost every big fighter.
Well, like they said about Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson used to beat him up in school. When he was 7, 8 years old, they used to beat him up because he had the lisp and he had the high-pitched voice and, whatever. And then somebody killed one of his pigeons and it set off a storm. And next thing he's kicking everybody's ass, adults included. But I'll tell you another thing about Riddick. One time in person and one time on TV within the last few years. I saw Riddick. I didn't get a chance to go over and see him personally because I was getting ready to leave at that Fight Fan Expo in Vegas a couple years ago. And I'm looking over at him and I'm like, man, they didn't look good. I don't even know if he was standing up or he was sitting down, but I was like, didn't look good. And he was on Family Feud not that long ago. It was 2 teams of boxers. I think Danny Garcia was on there. James Toney stole the show, but Riddick Bowe was on there, and everybody else was standing. He had a high type of stool, so he was sitting down for most of the time. And then
I don't think he'd be ready for a rematch with Holyfield these days. But
you think about the Holyfield fight when his reflexes and his legs were so gone. I could see Bowe being 10 times worse.
Yeah. Well, if you remember back when we interviewed him, he had a fight, I believe, shortly after that over in Japan. I don't think he ever referenced it during our interview, but I think he was promoting it around the same time. And he got signed up for this fight in Japan with a guy who was a kickboxer. And, he had obviously not prepared for the Muay Thai style of fighting where, you get leg kicks and all that stuff. So the guy kicked him in the legs 10 times and knocked him flat on his ass, and that was it. So
yeah, I remember that. I remember that. Remy Bojavsky, that was the guy that fought him.
Yeah, it was insane for him to even sign up for that.
A mess for both.
It's just so stupid. At least Floyd Mayweather, when he did that shit, he made it a boxing match. It was not a kickboxing fight. And it was an exhibition, when Floyd did it. But anyway, I'm going to play a little of this interview because it's the part that we all laugh about. But I don't know if Tom's actually heard it yet. So here we go.
Well, one reason could be, that like Tony and I, when we were in college and boxed, we were only like, a handful of schools that had boxing teams. And actually, when I went to freshman year at the Air Force Academy, it was my first experience boxing at all, competitively. And they had just cut out the mandatory program, because they used to have it mandatory for every freshman coming through would have to take boxing lessons and actually have at least one match. And they got rid of that because they were too worried about safety issues and stuff like that. And kids didn't want to do it.
Yeah, if I knew you can go to college and boxing, I probably went to college, you know that?
Right. And
I guess I got my degree in kick.
You get your degree in what?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. What'd you say you got your degree in?
I said, I kick assology.
I kick assology.
I would say my degree was ass whiponomics.
Ass whooping,
Hey, Riddick, one question I wanted to ask you on a serious note. This is going back to your championship career. I always felt like I was always unlucky when you were fighting Holyfield. When you had the first fight with him, which I wrote an article a couple of years ago on the greatest heavyweight title fights of all times, and I forget where I had you guys ranked, but it was within the top 5. With fights like Frazier Ali 1 and 3, with fights like Holmes and Norton. That night, I was saying a little bit ago, and then we're kind of getting cut off. My younger cousin, she was just born that day, so my mom made me go to the hospital that night. I was like 16, maybe 17, I think 16. They made me go to the hospital, to visit my aunt and visit the baby. So now my cousin, she's 19 years old, and I'm like, you know what? I still hold it against you that I had to miss the first Riddick Bowe Evander Holyfield fight live, to come see you in the hospital. And then a month later, I had to go to your christening, and I had to miss an Eagles game. And then the next year, the night in Vegas with Fan Man, I had my homecoming dance. But I want to ask you about that. What was your initial reaction when you saw a guy parachute into the ring?
Well, actually, I think it was a serious thing. But I think they came close to a fight. No, because I had to wait 20 minutes for the warm up. I mean,
it's got to be your only loss. You can't change that, and it's one of those things that you have a legitimate argument that they should have done to treated it differently. But it's unfortunate. But obviously, you got the best of them in the other 2 fights, so you can always say that, right? Now, what do you do outside the sport of boxing to keep yourself entertained?
Well, I don't do much, I'm with my wife and my daughter all day, every day. I'm not training, so I'm just taking it easy.
Mm-hmm. And when did you decide to actually come back and get serious about it?
Well, I look at the heavyweight division, and like you say, the heavyweight championships are in Europe somewhere. They should be over in America. And the heavyweight division is weak. I don't think people are going to give it back, the really give my hard fight. So I think it's just an opportunity for me to take and I can, get on board what they need.
Right.
Bring the championship back to America.
So would you be interested in getting a fight with the Klitschko's?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which one would you rather face first, Vladimir or what's the other one, Tony? Vitaly. You want to fight Battalion?
I don't care who. I mean, I don't care how I'm fighting. What order in, but I know I could beat both of them.
Yeah. Well, they won't fight each other, so somebody's going to unify the titles by fighting them, I guess.
And what would you say? The other one want to come in with Van G-Balls, and I'll knock him out.
And have you actually looked for an opponent for your first fight, though? Is there anybody in the works for that? Your first fight back from comeback.
Yeah. And then when I tell you, you're not going to believe it. Yes, we is. And somebody I can walk. Somebody I can walk. Guess who? You.
Me? You want to box me?
Absolutely.
I'm getting up there to heavyweight, so
You guys know this guy owns a fight?
I might be able to, but I'll still get my ass kicked. But hey,
I let people because that's what you do. Look, did you ever fight pro?
No, I never did. But actually, I almost had a chance to spar with James Toney's cousin at one point. That's probably as close as I ever got to going pro. But the last boxing match I had actually it was a sparring session, really, against the kid who won the New England Golden Gloves at 100.
There it is. We're going to cut it off there. It ends like 5 minutes later, but yeah, that's where Riddick Bowe said he wanted to fight me. First fight back. He never had his first fight back, so I guess the call out still stands. Like, Bowe, you better get your license.
Yeah.
Let's do like a YouTube promo. Clear that audio up. That audio, unfortunately, has got a lot of echoes in it. For some reason, we had some echo problems that night, but you know, Tony and I were coming in clear. There's just certain times when Bowe was talking, I think he was listening to the show at the same time because it was live then. So he probably had a little bit too up on whatever. Whoever was with him was probably listening to it at the same time. But yeah, it was some funny stuff. It's like, you. But yeah.
So do you guys know who this guy is that Lamar Odom is going to fight now? The J-Lo's ex?
J-Lo's
Johnny
ex?
Noah?
No, I never heard of him. But I was going to segue from that into another story about another athlete. If he doesn't find an opponent, this would be a good next opponent if he does find an opponent too. But at age 38, Frank Gore is not going back to being a running back. He wants to go into boxing. He says he's training for both football and boxing, but he's always loved boxing, so that's what he's been doing. And we're trying to make a fight happen. If we do, you'll see me in the ring, he says. So he's been actively training the last few months, and supposedly there's already a high-profile fight in the works. And he's also hired noted fight agent Malky Kawa, who is also a football agent. So, pretty big stuff. You know, we're always saying the guys that need to be in boxing are in football. And we got a little bit of a tease with Sean Merriman, formerly of the Chargers, a mean linebacker, talking about getting into it, and it turned into mostly talk and never any action. But he does have a fight league of his own right now. And then we could go from that to another story about somebody who's really getting close to retirement. It's not totally official yet, but it seems like it because Manny Pacquiao has announced that he's running for the Philippines president next year, 2022. So you could think, I mean, you could pretty much see there's no possibility that he's going to box as president of the Philippines. So the only chance that he's probably going to box again is if he loses that race, which is probably impossible. I mean, he would have to, like, murder 10 people before that would happen. I don't think it's...
Are you kidding? Maybe, like, there's 10 people needed to get murdered.
Yeah. So, he's very popular over there. I don't see him losing. But, yeah, so... has that bad note that he's leaving on, but his actually team came out and claimed that it's not true. The original reports that said he was retiring because of that. So he's obviously keeping the option open, but I think it's only because there is a possibility he could lose by some fluke thing. He doesn't want to look past his next opponent, to use some boxing terminology. But, yeah, crazy shit. And here's an interesting thing, getting back to Holyfield. There's an article in the UK newspaper, Morning Star Online, and they call the Holyfield fight with Vitor the most grotesque car crash ever witnessed in a boxing ring. A guy named John White, W-I-G-H-T, and just rips the whole situation. But, I mean, I hope they're really not making it worse by trying to prop Holyfield up for what he isn't, because that's the main reason why they pulled the Bowe fight off the cards, was because Bowe's team misrepresented how healthy Bowe was. So, yeah, can't have that if that's going on. I don't know. I mean, it could be it was just a bad night for Evander, but I think there's a lot more to it that they're not telling us. They just want to make money off of his name, just like everybody else who's ever screwed him over.
Yep.
And I think that's the saddest part of it all, is that he needs the money. He just recently sold his house a few years ago, one of his mansions, to get money. And even Tyson, when he did his fight, there was a dispute over the money, and he was mad, and he comes to find out his team had already been paid. It's like, they didn't tell him about it? Like, what is going on? Got a couple more stories, and we'll get to the scheduling, the previews and the recaps. Won a little bit of money on FanDuel, but not enough on the UFC fight. But here's a pretty good one. Richard Schaefer is back in the news again. Years ago, he started a little promotion thing, management company, after he split from Golden Boy, and it was called Ringstar Sports. I remember publishing a couple little news stories here and there about some of his fighters, but it never really got huge. Now he's starting a company called Pro Bellum. It's a boxing promotion and media company launched on last Monday. And Richard Schaefer is the company's president. They aim to take a global approach to the sport using alliances in different territories, Europe, Eastern Bloc, Asia, Middle East, and Africa among them, in an attempt to unify a fragmented industry. And they're supposed to be supporting boxing from the grassroots level to major championship bouts, and they want to promote, co-promote, or support 100 plus events in their first year of business. And Schaefer estimates that 80 to 90% of those events will take place outside of the U.S. So, he wants to work with every promoter. Good luck with that. He says Pro Bellum is going to be vastly different from Ringstar. The major change is the team Pro Bellum has formed. Harrison Whitman, a key deal maker and general counsel at Top Rank for 5+ years, will serve as chief strategy and legal officer at Pro Bellum. Eric Winter, a former media executive at UFC and Yahoo Sports, joined Pro Bellum as chief operating officer. And Anthony Petosa, an Emmy award-winning production executive who spent more than a decade at UFC, will shape the look and feel of original content on the platform. And then Anthony Catanzaro, who guided the career of former champion Paulie Malignaggi, is vice president of business operations for the Pro Bellum. Catanzaro most recently was a boxing executive for Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Well, that's pretty good. I would have put that first than, Paulie Malignaggi's manager. Not Paulie too much, but I think the Barclays thing is more relevant. So yeah, that's a pretty good team, and if they can all fire, on the same cylinder, on all cylinders, and keep it going, and make it a reality. This conception here sounds like a good deal. Sounds like they'll get a lot of attention for some more fights that happen outside the United States. And let's see, Frank Gore, we talked about that. You guys watched any of the Game of Thrones series at all?
I don't. I barely watch any like TV. Like, watch just my baseball games, my football games, my fights.
Well, I know you've seen the World's Strongest Man competitions, though, right?
What?
Everybody's seen the World's Strongest Man competitions. You guys have seen those, right?
I've seen them. I mean, I don't regularly, but I've seen them.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is the World's Strongest Man, Hafthor Bjornsson, needed just one round to take out his first opponent in the boxing ring. They call him the Mountain in the Game of Thrones. Probably, it's like, Butterbean. He's more well known for his little 5-minute appearance in Jackass than he is for his athletic accomplishments. So, the World's Strongest Man here, guy who's had the title, Bjornsson, is more well known for his appearance in Game of Thrones probably than he is for all this athletic stuff. But he's getting into boxing. He was the guy that broke his deadlift record, I think. Some kind of weightlifting record. A guy named Eddie Hall broke it. And they are supposed to fight each other at some point. But I guess Hafthor decided he needed a tune-up match first. So I don't know much about this guy, but he's an arm wrestling champ. Tells you he probably wasn't good at boxing. He TKO'd him in the first round in a fight in Dubai. Crazy. There's a bunch of other strength athletes turned fighters. So, talk about a freak show fight. The whole card. So there's that. We got one other story for the schedules. Fedor Emelianenko. They asked him about ring card girls recently, and I don't know. I don't know if he's like one of those Muslim Russians or what, but he shared his take. He said that they should dress them more decent. And Khabib actually was the last one to have some negative comments about this. That's why I kind of say that, the Muslim thing. Essentially saying they don't add anything to the sport. Other fighters have reacted to what he said, with some agreeing, but many others disagreeing. And Emelianenko, who has been around his fair share of MMA events, has no problem with the ring card girls themselves. The only thing that he hopes is that they be dressed more decently. Might also have something to do with the fact that because Russia has such a high population of Muslims, they recently, like within a few years ago, I remember talking about it on the show, they decided across the board to dress the ring girls differently, so they wouldn't offend the Muslims, and they could have more people show up for their events because they weren't forbidden from seeing naked women or half naked women. Because in that culture, where I found out the hard way, you're not allowed before you're the age of 35 to even see a naked woman who is not in your family or whatever.
Oh, really? God.
Can you imagine that? It's crazy.
No, I cannot.
So it happened because one of the kids in my unit at Norwich, he was like one of the freshmen. He was from Indonesia. He was a Muslim, Asian kid. And did the Quran thing, not the Quran thing, the facing Mecca and, doing the prayer thing with the prayer rug all the time. He had to do it at certain times of day. We had to give him time to do that and all that. But he comes down to my room. I wasn't even, in charge of the freshmen at this point. It was, later on in the year. And I had taken a different job with the something without, training anybody. So I was down in my room, like 2 floors down below the freshman, and he comes down in my room crying one night. And he tells me the whole spiel about, like, yeah, I'm not supposed to see a naked woman before I'm 35. And these 2 roommates of mine were playing strip poker, like, not the one roommate and a girl from another room. And he saw a flash of boob or something, and he was devastated. Like, just could not contain himself. He was so upset. But I was like the only one that he trusted to talk to, so he came down and talked to me about it. Like, he just sat against the door, bawling his eyes out because he saw a naked woman for the first time. Can you imagine that? Like, this is what the Taliban is putting their people through right now. I hate to make light of it, but it was funny to me at the time.
20 years ago, when the whole thing with the 9/11 and going over there to oust the Taliban and all that, like, the Taliban was so strict with everything.
Right.
It was a boxing gym, and they weren't allowing them to have any photos of the wall because they weren't allowed to have photos of other, like, humans, because everything had to be toward God or Allah or whatever it is. And the one picture they had on the wall that had to be taken down was Muhammad Ali. Well, who's more Muslim than Muhammad Ali?
Yeah. Ridiculous.
But maybe he wasn't the right designee. Because you gotta remember, like, maybe it's, like, I guess they all have, like, different culture or whatever, because it was, like, and I guess, like, with Christianity as well, you have like, your Catholics, your Protestants, your Baptists, and all that, your Lutherans. So, yeah, we're all Christian, but we all follow, quote-unquote, Christ's teaching. But I guess we all have, like, different, interpretations of it. So he could be able to look at it really, really, really strict Muslim, where it's you can't drink, you can't, do this, you have to pray 5 times a day. You can't see one with maybe other ones are, not like that. I mean, it's because I can't speak for that religion.
Yeah, well, we know that.
One, like, women have like a full face covering.
Yeah.
One, they only have the head covering. One, they're dressed, normal. You wouldn't know unless they said something.
We know for the most part, like, even though some Arab countries have democratized a little bit, mostly Saudi Arabia, but most of the Arab cultures, whether they're extreme or not, just have a very low opinion of all women. They just believe they're second-class citizens across the board. And it's for this kid to be that afraid of seeing one naked when that's part of their culture, like, they're supposed to be second-class citizens. It just doesn't jive. Like, it was just impossible for me to understand being from a different culture. Like, I guess you had to be there and grow up in that culture to understand it. But yeah, that was one of my first revelations about the Muslim culture. You can't see a naked woman before you're 35. Oh boy, I thought Catholicism was bad.
Right.
Wow. Anyway, so Fedor doesn't want to see half-naked chicks in the ring before his fights. That's the story. Okay, so now we go to boxing. I did see actually one boxing match this weekend. This last weekend. It happened to be the most boring one I've witnessed in a long time. Although this Diner Barrio guy was pretty crafty. He didn't get himself knocked out, but Jose Valenzuela just tuned him up pretty good. He looked like a little bit like Meldrick Taylor in there for a minute with his speed and combinations, but it just wasn't as hard punching or impactful in his attack. And just scored enough points to win, but it just didn't look spectacular. He just faced a veteran, and actually there was some really good slugging at a couple of points between the two of them. But otherwise, it was pretty flat. Barrio had the ability to, like, dance around and stay alive and not get close to being knocked out. But whenever it came time to attack it, he just never really stepped on the gas enough. He never really took advantage of his opportunities. And he had Valenzuela backing up for a minute. He just never had the closing skills, I guess. But yeah, I watched the whole damn thing. There's really no other big names who fought. It was a slow weekend last week.
Yeah, well, I watched the very good fight. It was one of those fights that I had on, like, in the background while I was doing other shit. It wasn't like a fight that you would be sitting on the edge of your seat. Be one-sided. But, I mean, you know, like this year, and this is what I've been saying a lot this year, you know, I went to, you know, some baseball games this year. Most of them were good. The last one was not too good. And I've been watching, you know, a lot of games on TV, whether they're baseball games or whether they're football games or whatever. And every time I start getting pissed off and I want to bitch about something, I think, you know what? A year ago, you couldn't go to a game. You know, well, a year ago, you weren't sure, you know, if the season was even going to happen. You know, a year ago, you couldn't go to fights. You could barely watch fights. So there was no crowd at the fights. And that's one of the great things about a boxing match is, like, you know, that crowd. Even seeing people in the crowd. My dad had flipped on an old Showtime fight that was being replayed about a week ago. My dad goes, is this fight old? I said, yeah, Dad, it's about a year and a half old. It was about a month or so before things started shutting down. It was up at either Madison Square Garden or the Barclays Center. And it was a kid from Philly, Stephen Fulton, bantamweight, undefeated. And in the 4th or 5th round, the guy actually picked him up and body slammed him. And I'm like, Dad, don't you remember that fight? I said, look, there's our buddy Simon, who you and I interviewed, Rich, in the big yellow shirt. And I mean, he was throwing a fit in about the 4th row. And I'm like, for 3 rounds, he's throwing a fit. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, remember Simon? There he is in the yellow shirt making an ass of himself. I thought he was going to jump in the ring. But I missed that during, you know, that year plus, or however many, 10 months or 12 months or whatever it's been, you know, where you couldn't be there, like, you know, or you're watching a fight and it's watered down. The action wasn't watered down, but you felt bad for the fighters because, like, you're in there and you're not getting that crowd reaction. Rich, you and I fought in front of crowds. You know, we fought out, you know, places like Kentucky. We fought at places, you know, like Navy and all that, where it's like, you know, that crowd can either really pick you up, and that lack of crowd sometimes can almost hurt your emotions. I used to feed off the emotions, and I know fighting Jesse Bond that one time, and there was literally 12 people in the crowd who threw the afternoon show, and it was nothing, you know.
I thought it was in Kentucky.
It was a hard time getting up for it.
I didn't know anybody there, and the ref was not helping me out. Mr. Jesse Bond at all. Son of a bitch. Yeah, it was quite the experience. That's for sure. I don't remember, like, getting a charge off the crowd, because I never really had a home crowd except for VMI, and they had such a small gym.
Yeah, with VMI that was tough.
They only had, like, 2 risers of seats, and I don't remember. I remember, like, my buddy yelling, but, I mean, I don't remember, like, the crowd being a factor.
You know what's funny? I wish I could get a... And they never released it, probably because they didn't want, you know, the horrible judging to be seen on not just my fight, but my one other teammate fights and a few other fights, which was the East-West Classic in Reno. So I went from like at Lock Haven versus Jordan, where the crowd was so pro-me that I couldn't hear the bell. And then 2 weeks later, I'm at Reno fighting Brian Kerr, and the crowd chanted death chants at me, but once again they were so loud. And then after that, like Jesse Bond down at Navy in the afternoon with 12 people in the crowd. I'm like, I went from like the ultimate, like, you know, good guy at WrestleMania versus the ultimate bad guy at WrestleMania. You know,
I was just glad there was no crowd the first time I fought that Terry kid from Navy, and it was just in their gym as a scrimmage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my ass kicked.
Yeah, that time, but because I did that, I fought down there a couple times on those scrimmages, but usually the weekend you guys would do it, being BMI, being second semester. That weekend is when I would fight up in Valhalla, New York. Ironically, the guy that ran that card up there was named Steve Acuccia. We interviewed him. He's since passed away, but he was friends with Rocky Marciano as well. So when you guys were down at Navy, I was up at New York. I would do the Navy scrimmage usually in October. And they had 3 rings going, and it was like, you know, so sometimes like, okay, the Lock Haven guys are going to be in ring 2 today. So that way we could all kind of be together, and 2 of us weren't fighting at the same time. And, you know, it could be like the BMI guys are going to be going against Navy guys in ring number 1. But yeah, so yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about there with the only emotion would be your teammates, you know, cheering you on.
Yeah. The only thing that I liked about it was it made me feel a little bit at home because they had the rings there set up like they did at the Air Force Academy, where they were like, the posts were bolted to the floor and they had a mat. You know, it wasn't like up on a pedestal, like, you know, you had to climb up into it.
There were floor rings. You know, you didn't have to go up the step. There was right there. You just stepped into them.
But anyway, yeah, those are the days. I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon again, unless it's against Riddick Bowe. But I still might do the MMA fight. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still not ruling that out because I got another year till my 45th birthday, because my 44th is coming right up. It's like 2 days away here. It's October 1st. But I'm not.
You know, Rich, I was thinking about, you know, those scrimmages down at Navy. One of the ones I'll never forget, and I still got the write-up after it was over. You know, we went down there, and I was the club president, so I kind of had to go. We were having our NCBA meeting, you know, whatever. They were having our NCBA meeting, so as the president, I had to sit in on it. And then, you know, we were going to do a scrimmage, and there was, I think, like 5 of us from Lock Haven that went. It was me, as a veteran fighter, and 4 guys. It was going to be their first time in, you know, sparring against somebody from another team. They had sparred a couple times in our gym, but, you know, never off site. So, you know, we go down there, and I get paired up with this kid from Navy, and they would, like, you know, when everybody had to take like boxing for like a semester, and they would try to find out who was good.
Navy was the last one to get rid of that.
He wasn't. Yeah, I can believe it. You know, so he was one that was never going to make it, right? So we get into the first round, and I started hitting him pretty good, you know. And this is my first time back off knee surgery, so I'm a little concerned about my stamina. I'm a little concerned, you know, how, you know, if I take a punch, how my leg's going to hold up the way, you know, my leg's going to be strong, you know, whatever. So I'm in the first round, and I'm starting to work pretty good. Second round, I'm starting to cook now. I'm starting to feel like the old me. I'm popping him pretty good. He's bleeding a little bit out the nose. Third round, I catch him with a couple good shots. Dr. Cox is over at me and basically says, Tyson, you know, don't really beat on this kid anymore. You pretty much done what you needed to do. You got some good work in. Don't try to knock him out. He just looked at me. So I used the last 20, 30 seconds basically to move and box. You know, I'd get up off the ropes, I'd kind of do the shoulder roll, and I'd counter jab, but I was only throwing jabs at that point, no hooks, no right hands. So we get the write-up, and Dr. Cox evaluates all of us, and I get it like a week later, and I'm reading it. So-and-so, he did pretty good, needs to work on this, has courage, whatever, so-and-so. He's a prospect, he could be okay, continued work. Penical needs to work on killer instinct. Needs to work on killer instinct. I had this guy on my ass, he told me to back off him. You basically back me off, and then, no, just ice it. And I'm like, okay, well, don't tell me, you know, if it would have been a fight, he would have been like, yo, take him out.
Yeah. Maybe he really meant to say ice him.
Yeah, put him on ice.
Anyway, we got a couple decent fights this weekend, a couple fight cards worth mentioning, and this one, I just thought the guy's name was cool, and it's an undefeated fighter facing him. It's in Fort Washington, Maryland, probably not going to be on TV, but it's a super bantamweight fight between Dominique Crowder, 9-0, and Rob Diesel, with a Z.
Nice.
Diezel.
Love that name.
He is 14-7, but he has won 5 out of his last 6. And we go to the heavyweights, the big boys.
Yeah, we got the big one this weekend.
Yeah.
Or one of the big ones.
I don't know if it's really going to be that big. But, Anthony Joshua is got a mandatory opponent, I believe, right? Alexander Usyk.
Yeah.
He's fighting for the WBA Super World Heavyweight title, the IBF World Heavyweight title, the WBO World Heavyweight title, and the International Boxing Organization World Heavyweight title. Usyk might not be a superstar, but he's 18-0, and Joshua has the one loss to a guy that nobody expected him to lose to, that's for sure. But he does have the one loss, so you always kind of wonder, what it's going to take to beat the undefeated guy. Anthony Joshua has
I've been reading a lot on this.
We'll
and see, here's where, you see, like normally, if, when I would write up my old reports on the big fights, and usually you get a vision. Sometimes you get a vision that's crystal clear. You get like Tom's, crystal ball, and it comes right to you. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're spot on. Sometimes you're not. This fight is like, Usyk is a hard guy. Well, so is Joshua. They're both hard guys to figure out. Joshua's big. He's got the Olympic pedigree, but so does Usyk. He was undefeated, and he was really, bombing everybody for a long time. And then he, fight Klitschko, and Vladimir Klitschko, and he's really beaten Klitschko pretty good early. He has him down, and then he got hurt for the first time in his career. And maybe it was Klitschko not going in for the kill that let Joshua recover and then come back and win that fight in pretty spectacular fashion. But right after that, Joshua was fighting Ruiz, who was a heavy underdog but a skilled fighter, knocks him down, and he gets caught with the counter punch and gets dropped 3 or 4 more times. Fight gets stopped. Now they have a rematch. Ruiz doesn't come in good shape. That's whatever. But Joshua was extremely cautious. He was a guy that you looked at and you're like, he doesn't believe in his chin.
Yeah. It's like Gagne.
It's like a great
like Gagne in the UFC. Just fights technical now.
It's like a great pitcher that has like a dynamic fastball, but it gets hit for a home run. And then they're like, he doesn't want to throw it again. He's like afraid of using his fastball. And I think Joshua was afraid of his chin.
Yeah.
Now, Usyk was a natural cruiserweight. He's big, he's tough, he's skilled. But if you look at the rankings on like all like the publications, for a while they didn't have him ranked because they didn't know if he was a cruiserweight or a heavyweight. So he was ranked in neither. And then now I got to look to see if he's ranked as a mandatory in one of the organizations which is forcing him to fight. But if you look at the ring publication, he's like number 10. And I think a lot of it has to do with
his 18 wins.
He's, not skilled.
He's a southpaw.
I think it's because they don't know if he's, a legitimate heavyweight. Now, skill versus skill, Usyk might be more skilled, but maybe he doesn't have the natural size and strength. Because I think Joshua's going to outweigh him probably by about a good 20 or 25 pounds at least.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, you look at the 18 people that he beat, though, and there's no cheap dates, as Tom would say. Marco Huck, TKO'd Marco Huck back in 2017. Christoph, I'm probably going to butcher this one, but Glowacki.
Glowacki.
Guacamole. Christoph Guacamole, 26-0, going in. Gave him his first loss in one of his earlier fights. Myriat Gassiev gave him his first loss by unanimous decision. Maris Bradis, first loss by majority decision. Tony Bellew.
Now the question is, what weight was he? Tony Bellew. I watched that fight. Now I want to say something about at least 3 of the 5 fighters you just mentioned, Tony Bellew was a very good light heavyweight. I think he fought Usyk at heavyweight, but Bellew was a natural heavyweight and cruiserweight. Had a little success at heavyweight, and Usyk knocked him out. It was a competitive fight. Usyk did knock him out around the 8th round, I think it was. He blasted him with a right hand. But most of Tony Bellew's career was light heavyweight and cruiserweight. Right. Christoph Gluarchik, cruiserweight. Marco Huck, cruiserweight. So now the thing is, are you getting any true, legitimate heavyweights on there?
Right.
Let me look myself while I'm here.
Derek Chisora was the last one he fought. That was for the Intercontinental Heavyweight title, WBO. That was last year. Halloween last year. So yeah, that's probably one of the only legitimate heavyweights recently. Fought for some cruiserweight titles before that, but everything else was cruiserweight. But yeah, I think that'll be a decent fight. I don't expect Usyk to win, but I don't rule it out either.
I definitely don't rule it out.
If he does win, I think it would be more likely that he wins by knockout and he finds the button than if he wins by decision.
I can believe that as well.
But I'm going to say Anthony Joshua wins by decision to be safe. If I had some money to blow, I'd probably throw it on Usyk just for shits and giggles to see what happens. But
I'm looking right now.
I bet my house on it.
I'm looking at Usyk's record right now, and I'm looking at some of the guys that he's fought. Like I said, he's only had was it 18 professional fights? Yeah, he's 18 of those 13 knockouts. So, okay, his last fight was Derek Chisora, unanimous decision. Close unanimous decision, 115-113 on 2 of the 3 cards. Chisora's a big guy. Chisora was 255. Chaz Witherspoon out of Philadelphia. I know Chaz. I know his family. Chaz, even though he was 38-3, was definitely on the downside of his career. They fought in late 2019. Chaz was definitely on the downside. He was, a potential contender, around the mid-2000s, 2006, 2007, 2008. Chaz was 242. After that, Tony Bellew, 199. Murat Gassiev, 198. Marius Brutus, 199. Marco Huck, 198. So, you're looking at all guys that were at or around 200, except for his last 2 fights. Now, let's see what Joshua has been weighing in for his last fight. Kubrat Pulev with 9th round knockout, 240. Andy Ruiz, 237. Andy Ruiz, the first time, 247. Povetkin, 245. And, so you're looking at the guy that's been in the 250 range against the guy that's...
Excuse me.
Basically,
are you not a Rocky Marciano fan, sir?
Yes, I am.
So, what weight did he fight at most of his career?
185.
So it's possible. It's possible. He could be a world beater. And Holyfield, too.
No, I think I would get Usyk is a skilled fighter. He can fight.
Anyway, what do you think about this one, Psychic Guy?
I think Usyk's path to victory is very narrow. He cannot make a mistake. Now, maybe he's added some power, but I've got to go with Joshua.
Would that be on the Magic 8 Ball? Highly doubtful?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I think so too, but, I can give him the puncher's chance for the knockout. He's got 13 of them to go with 18 wins. It's not out of the realm of possibility. We just have to see what style.
At cruiserweight.
Anthony, yeah.
At cruiserweight.
Of course, you gotta put that asterisk on it. But, Anthony has been touched before. He's been knocked down. He's been tested by a guy that nobody expected to test him. So, he really is... I think it put a good point of pressure on him so that it never happens again. He never wants it to happen again. But like Tony said, that could have a little bit of a stage fright effect on him. And could never go away. So you never know when that's going to like come back to really haunt you. And you have that moment where you take a punch that really hurts, and you shrink into the corner rather than fight back because your psyche kicks in. You're saying, I can't do this. So there's a lot of situations you could get in like that with a guy like Usyk. So we'll see. I don't think it's highly likely, but he's got a puncher's chance. I'm gonna say that.
It's funny to say that. I remember the first time I ever got my bell rung in a sparring session. We were at Lock Haven, and they put me in there with one of our All-Americans. I was a freshman. And this kid, and Doc basically told him, to test me. Whatever. And this kid, Dirk, well, boy, did he test me, and he was thumping me up pretty good. And I remember he got me in the corner first and second round, it was. Hit me with a right hand, I went down on my knees. It was like, I think it was more the force of the blow instead of being hurt, It just like the punch just jolted me down, because I didn't know how to really have good balance yet. And then, got up and, third round, he's tattooing me pretty good. And the next thing I know, he knocked me down. I landed on my butt, and they're like, okay, that's pretty much enough for you too. And I was walking out, I was like, oh my God. It was like, so now, my confidence needs to be rebuilt. And I had another sparring session or two, and I did okay, but I was like real tentative. So I go down to the Naval Academy for the ever scrimmage down there. And first kid I went in there with, I ended up getting him pretty good. I got him pretty good. But the first time he hit me, I was like, oh my God, am I hurt? I was like, that was my thought, my process. Am I hurt? Then I was saying to myself, no, you're not. You're okay.
Yeah.
But even the first fight after that, I was like, every time I got hit, I was afraid that my chin was going to fail me, and it took me a long time to be confident that I could stand in there and stand in the pocket, like a quarterback that gets blindsided, and he's like, he's afraid to stand back there anymore because he's not confident in his offensive line. He's worried that he's going to get hit, and he's going to get hurt, and he's going to fumble.
Yeah, I've had some incidences where I sparred and then went home and had some headaches and stuff, but I never fortunately came close to actually getting knocked out in the ring, except for when I let the kid try to knock me out in the last 30 seconds, and he outweighed me by 30 pounds. So I wasn't throwing a single punch until he really got me close, and then I saw that it would be coming within the next 3 punches if I didn't at least put a jab out there to get him.
I've been knocked down.
I didn't fight that as much as you, though. I fought one season in the NCBA. 1 season. 3-2.
I mean, I've been knocked down. But the first fight I had, I was okay, but then I ran out of gas, and my mouth was wide open, and you're not having that clenched, keeping a tight chin, and that one, it was like when I went down, like my dad said, he goes like, you got up, and you just leaned against the ropes, and the referee was like, okay, I'm gonna stop the fight, and it was like, and then when I went back, like the doctor was talking to me, like they were like, you were coherent, but you were like almost like you were afraid, like, oh my God, like do you remember what happened? No, I don't remember what happened. Well, it's like, well, then the doctor's gonna say, well, this guy has a concussion. Maybe I did, probably, but not as bad as maybe they graded it because I didn't know how to answer the question. Yeah. I've had other fights where you get your bell rung, and I'm like, yeah. One time I was like, I got my bell rung, I got hit, and I'd already knocked the guy down twice, and he got me. They gave me an 8 count. I remember thinking, it felt like it was 10 minutes, maybe 2 seconds. And I remember I wonder where the hell I am. And the referee's like, where are you? I'm like, oh shit, I feel like a kid that got called in school and didn't know the answer. I'm like, oh shit. And and then when I remembered where I was, I yelled it at him. I was like, I'm in Mansfield. He's like, all right, relax. I can see you. All right, you're okay.
You got the adrenaline shot.
That, you learn how to, and you know how I liken it when I tell people what it's like when you get hurt in a fight? It's like when you're drunk, but you're trying to act sober. Right. Like you're coming in from a night, you've been drinking, you're not trying to let anybody know you've been drinking. So you're trying to walk real straight.
I've never been there before.
Real coherent. Yeah. Neither have I.
No, never. No. A few times.
But that's like the way I explain it to people. But it's like, you know, the other times, like, you know, you got it done. I'm like, my dad told me, like, the one time I got hit in a fight and I got knocked down, I went down to a knee, and I got up, and he's like, do you remember what you did when you got up? I'm like, no. He's like, you yelled at Dr. Cox, because it was an exhibition, and he was going to stop it, and I was like, fucking stop this. And you looked at the other coach, you winked at him and stuck your tongue out. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. We had one fight, the fight that I was talking about, the Mansfield one. Mansfield! Well, after the fight was over, I mean, me and this guy, we went at it pretty hard. And, you know, I won. And, you know, I busted his nose, you know, busted my mouth open, you know, I knocked him down, he 8-counted me, you know, it was a good fight, you know. We got a standing ovation. And when it was over, you know, I went out to the lobby to get a cake break, and there was a girl there from Mansfield, she was selling t-shirts for her volleyball team or whatever it was. My dad's like, hey man, I think she was pretty cute. She was looking at you. I'm like, Dad, I can't see her right now. She's got 2 heads. She's got 4 heads and 4 tits. She looks like something you would see out of a monster movie in my eyes.
Oh, no. Well, anyway, over the London fights, we have somebody's always got to go fights. We got 2 of them. We got a cruiserweight. Speaking of cruiserweights, Lawrence Oakley, 16-0, fighting Dylan Krasovic, who is 15-0. That one's for the WBO World Cruiserweight title. And we got a light heavyweight fight, not undefeated guys, but Callum Smith, pretty big name, 27-1, fighting Lennon Castillo, 21-3-1. And then we got the undefeated fighters on the card here. Maxim Prodan, he's 19-0-1, fighting Florian Marco, who's 8-0-1. For the IBF International Welterweight title.
Smith only lost to us.
What? Smith only lost to us to Canelo?
Callum Smith only lost was to Canelo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he got to win that one pretty handily.
That's high grade of that. Canelo, swinging hands at the press conference. You see that?
Yeah. And then this one, I have to mention it, not because it's a big fight, but just because of the names. I got to make a joke about this one. It's a welterweight fight on another card in the United Kingdom, not on the same card as Joshua. But we got Ben Crocker, who must be Betty Crocker's brother. He is making his debut. And he's fighting a guy named Naeem Ali. And I think Muhammad Ali called from the afterlife and wants his name back. Because this guy is 2-75 with 1 draw. 2 wins, 75 losses. And his name is Ali. Cut it out, dude. Also, I forgot to mention, there's a guy named Campbell Hatton on the card with Anthony Joshua. At lightweight, who is 3-0. And I have a sneaking suspicion he might be related to another Hatton, who is also from the UK. He's fighting a guy named Sonny Martinez, who is 2-4, so that's likely. I don't know how he's related, but I bet he's Ricky Hatton. Offspring of some kind. Campbell Hatton, super featherweight. Doesn't say much about him, doesn't have a picture. But he's had 3 out of the 4 fights in the UK and 1 in Gibraltar. So. And his first fight was a Jesus fight, believe it or not. The 0-10 Jesus Ruiz. Oh yeah, one other fight we have to mention is going on in Spain. And there's a couple guys that you might mention. You might recognize this name, Sergio Martinez. 53-3-2. He was supposed to have retired, I believe. But he's fighting Brian Rose here. Not a tune-up fight. Brian Rose is 32-6-1. Sergio Martinez in Spain, Madrid, Spain, on Saturday. Main event there is for the EBU, European Flyweight title. Not as big a name at all. Angel Moreno, 21-4-2, and Juan Inostroza, who is 10-9-1. Oh yeah, Brian Rose versus Sergio Martinez. See how that goes. try to get Jake Paul to sign up to fight Sergio Martinez if he wants to fight an old guy. Sergio can bulk up for that one. Alright, so we go to the UFC. We had quite the gigantic card for UFC fights last week. It was very hard to pick a winning lineup. But I managed to do one winning lineup. Didn't win the big money, but I won twice ticket money. And I had to have Ian Cutelaba on the team, who came close to a knockout, but didn't quite get the knockout, but he did have a big win over Devin Clark. And I picked the main event winner, Anthony Smith, to win by TKO. Well, you don't pick how he wins, but you just pick him. I picked him in the MVP slot, and he got a stoppage, so that's big. That was one card that I put together that won. Ewan, they call him. I always call him Ion because that's what it looks like. But I guess they call him Ewan Cutelaba. Had just a really great showing against Devin Clark. That was just a very impressive fight for me to watch. Just really like that style. Just grinding him out. And Anthony Smith just used his absolute unbelievable amount of experience to own Ryan Spann. Just absolutely demolished him. Took him 3 minutes and 47 seconds, but just embarrassed him out there. And then Ariane Lipsky over Mandy Baum. Like I always say, it's got to be a female fight in some way, shape, or form. It's got to affect the card. Well, it wasn't this one. Unanimous decision win for Lipsky. Arman Sarukian was one that you had to have. He knocked his opponent out by TKO, Christos Giagos. First round, 2 minutes and 9 seconds in. And then before that, we had another TKO win. I had Gravely on some other cards of mine, not the one, but he lost to Nathan Maness by TKO in the second round, 2 minutes and 10 seconds in. And Joaquin Buckley, I felt like he was going to be lucky again, so he was on my winning card. He got took a little bit longer, but he got the knockout in the third round from punches over Antonio Arroyo. And then there was another decision, Tafon Chukwi over Mike Rodriguez. Raquel Pennington, I had her on a couple cards. I knew she was going to win, but it was a unanimous decision over Penny Kianzad, so that was a big point win. And this is the other guy you really had to have, Zhu Rong. You couldn't be right unless you had wrong. He beat Brandon Jenkins by TKO, again in the third round, but it was a lot of accumulation of punches, I guess. He had a big score for that knockout. And went all the way to the last 30 seconds of the fight to the third round. So that was a big one. And we had Montel Jackson beating J.P. Buys by unanimous decision. Erin Blanchfield over Sarah Alpar, another female fight that didn't factor in. And this was a big mistake I made. Carlston Harris beating Impa Kasangane by TKO in the first round. So you had to have Carlston Harris. He was a cheap option too. Impa was supposed to be, the guy that was going to easily handle this. But he got TKO'd. That was a surprise for a lot of people, I guess, according to the sports books. So it was a surprise for that. Then we had a draw, a very unprecedented, very rare draw there in the second fight of the night. Gustavo Lopez and Hailey Alateng. It was a unanimous draw. The first fight of the night was the female fight that did impact the scorecards. You had to have Hannah Goldie beating Emily Whitmire, and Hannah was not favored, so if you had her, you were able to put a lot of the world beaters that were definitely going to win on your card. So that was a good start for a lot of people. A lot of times the first fight does factor in for some reason or another. Whether it's the guy or girl has the opportunity to lead off the show, so they feel like they have to go the extra mile. I don't know what it is, but a lot of times that first fight you get stopped, so it ends up being very important to your lineups. And this weekend we have a big one. Okanowski versus Ortega. going to go out on a limb and say you could bet your house on the co-main event. Shevchenko is going to win that one. I just don't think Lauren Murphy has enough in the tank there. She's been doing good. She's been putting some wins together. She's been looking all right, but Shevchenko is on a different level. Just a totally different level than Lauren Murphy. They both have a lot of experience, but yeah, she's earned her title shot, but I just don't think it's going to be a good one for her. It's going to be like Ally Kinta fighting, what's his name, Khabib on like three days' notice. Yeah, so good luck to her. I love what she's doing. She's got a lot of heart. You know, she's a great lady, but Lauren, I don't think she's gonna get out of this fight without a knockout. Get knocked out. Shevchenko's gonna really make it a point to smash her into the ground. But the main event is gonna be a little bit more competitive. These guys were coaches on The Ultimate Fighter. So this is the result. They have to fight each other now in the main event. Okanowski has just got one loss, and so does Ortega. 15-1 for Ortega. Okanowski has a few more fights. He's 22-1, but yeah, this is anybody's fight. This is a very tough one to predict. We might have to rely on Tom's crystal ball to tell me who to pick on FanDuel. I don't know. I really don't know. I like Volkanovski's style. Ortega has a little bit less experience, so if you put a gun to my head, I'd say Volkanovski. But I like Ortega's chances too. I don't know. What do you think, Tom? You with us, Tom?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
What do you think about Volkanovski Ortega?
I just have a feeling it's a hard one, but I think that Ortega took that last loss the right way. I think he had a few things to fix, and I'm going with him.
All right. He says Ortega. Well, it's possible, definitely. The one I'm not so sure of, I don't know what kind of shape Nick Diaz is in. They brought him back, they set up the fight, and they threw him in there. He had a quote recently, which was very poignant and sad at the same time. And he said something to the effect of, MMA took a lot out of me, but never gave anything back. You know,
yeah,
fighting.
I see that.
And they also said there was a shadowboxing video for promotional material that looked very depressing as far as his physique and the way he was punching. But I mean, that could just be because you're just doing promos. You don't like doing promos in the first place. I mean, Nick Diaz is famous for that, so he's got attitude issues there. But you have to factor in the fact that Nick Diaz has not fought in forever. Years, and he is.
And you have to factor in the fact that he's demanding the fight's officially at middleweight now.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
And they changed it
here's a guy that does triathlons, and they say he can fight forever.
Yeah.
Why can't he make weight? And Robbie Lawler, I don't know. I mean, I'm emotional about that, but Robbie Lawler's going along with it like it's no big deal. It is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's 15 pounds.
Well, I don't think Lawler's going to have any trouble. I really don't. I think Nick Diaz is overestimating this, or underestimating this, and is going to be overconfident because he's got the win, the knockout. I don't think instinct's going to kick in to the point that you can replace experience, recent experience. So I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed because they love Nick Diaz. The fight fans absolutely love both Diazes. They just like their style. They like the fact that they put their face out there and they let themselves get hit. They just keep fights going. And I think Nick Diaz has always been a little bit more talented if you put everything into it for every fight than Nate. But Nate came at a time where it was ripe for him to get to the top and make a name for himself. And he just had that. He had that outspoken attitude. Nick was more quiet. When you criticize people, it was like a quiet, uncomfortable thing. But Nate was always like in your face, yelling it out, being obnoxious at press conferences. Nick was always like a more quiet, reserved, but still willing to offend you type of guy. But the fans just love him. He's been in obviously a lot of meaningful fights, so they have good reason to. But he's helped build the sport. He's just an absolute legend from a lot of perspectives. But he's just the absolute last guy
Rich,
you want to bring back and do this to. Good.
Chael Sonnen brought up a good point about him. Rogan is such a big fan of the Diaz brothers because he believes that they changed the sport by weaponizing cardio.
Well then.
And Chael Sonnen kind of called him out on that, though. He said, name a fight where they did just, now, as far as their cardio, it's always been great. They're not going to quit. They'll be there for those 25 minutes. But weaponizing cardio, I'm kind of full of this, the Ali specials that I've been watching this whole week on PBS. But Joe Frazier weaponized cardio because he just kept coming at you. And he just wear you out. He'd throw a million punches around until you finally that was it. And as I was thinking about that, and Chael Sonnen said he'd like to know one example of where the Diaz brothers just completely made their opponents fight at a running pace. That's something to think about.
Yeah. Well, it's also going to be a stacked card underneath those guys. Pay-per-view event, so it ought to be. We got Curtis Blades at heavyweight fighting Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Blades 14-3, Rozenstruik 12-2. Both kind of in the top 10, obviously, but just never been really, really dominant when it comes to title chances. But they're still trying to work their way back, so we'll see. We'll see which guy has the better chin, because I think it's going to be a slugfest. Look at these two mugs. They both got the big beards. They're getting ready to get hit on the chin. Well,
it's going to be a clash of styles.
Yeah.
Blades is going to have to get it to the ground, and if he gets clocked on the way in, another KO is going to be devastating for him.
Right. And Rozenstruik is capable of a KO at the last possible second, if need be.
Yes.
Ninth fight of the night, we got Jessica Andrade, 21-9, fighting Cynthia Calvillo, who's 9-2-1. Andrade really got thrown around in her last fight. It was not very pretty for her. But, she's kind of a tune-up opportunity for her, girl with a lot less experience. But nonetheless, very tough. I've seen her fight. I've had her on the cards before. Favorable one. She's paid off. But, I don't know. She might be biting off a little bit more than she can chew on this one. And we got some guys with a little bit of experience. Marlon Moraes, 23-8, with one draw, fighting 13-4 Merab Davalishvili. And then Dan Hooker, 20-10, fighting Nasrat Hakparast, who's 13-3. Right before that, Shamil Abdurakhimov, who's 20-5, fighting Chris Daukus, 11-3. And former interview subject of mine years ago, Roxanne Modafferi, 25-18, fighting Taylor Santos, who's 17-1. I've never even heard of this girl. 17-1 as a female fighter. I gotta see where she's from. Alright, before that we got Uros Medic, who is 7-0, fighting Jalen Turner, who's 10-5. Third fight of the night, Nick Maximov, 6-0, fighting Cody Brundage, who's 6-1. And the old Matthew Semmelsberger, already back, he's 8-3, fighting Martin Sano, who's 4-2-1. And Semmelsberger was one of those guys I talked about a few weeks ago. He was on a card and he was rated really, really cheap. But he has a lot of fights. He has a lot of tough fights and good experience. So, he was really cheap. Everybody thought he was going to lose, and he ended up winning. And he was one of the cheapest fighters. So if you have him, Anyway, first fight of the night, Jonathan Pierce, 10-4, fighting Omar Morales, who's 11-1. That is a great set of records for the first fight of the night. And that's what it is if none of the fights get canceled for whatever reason. But let's see, the 17-1 girl here. She has had, let's see, 3 fights officially in the UFC. 1 to get in on the Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Been in the UFC since 2008, since she won that fight. And then her first big fight on a regular card was a split decision loss to Mara Romero Barella. And a win against Molly McCann, a girl they call Meatball, and Jillian Robertson. Unanimous decisions over both of them. Now she's going against Montferry. Montferry's actually improved her striking quite a bit over the last few years. So it's not necessarily an opponent situation there. She's going to come and fight. And then we had Phil Davis and Yoel Romero. We're going to recap that. That's it. We got nothing coming up for Bellator this weekend. But we did have some crazy news. I know Anthony Rumble Davis was, because he his first fight back to Bellator, because he ended up borrowing somebody's credit card to make the flight out to the event without telling them. So now he's apparently pulled out of the light heavyweight Grand Prix for an unexplained illness. And the only thing he posted about it was that he said he hasn't been afraid of anything more in his life than this. So, you automatically think the C word, cancer, but, could be something else we don't know about. Could be an addiction issue, and that's usually what happens when you steal things from other people. You have some kind of addiction. So, I don't know if it's something that doesn't show up on drug tests, that didn't pop them on something, or if it's really a, legitimate illness type of thing. But you'd think, if it was cancer, you wouldn't be embarrassed to not talk about it. You'd probably be all right talking about it, but everybody's different, so I don't know what the real story is with Rumble Johnson. We hope he's all right. But he pulled out, and now Phil Davis is actually trying to get himself in, but they put some guy in named Anglicus. So he's next. But anyway, Phil Davis was in the main event the other night. He made easy work of Yoel Romero. Got a split decision win, which I don't know who the judge was that voted for Romero, but he needs to go back to training, because Phil just dominated that fight, and Yoel really didn't look that good. But he's making his debut, so I guess they had to make him feel good with one judge going his way. Then we had Neiman Gracie, made sure he didn't need a judge. Got the TKO from punches and elbows in the first round, 1 minute and 27 seconds in over Mark Lemminger. And then Deanna Bennett had a pretty decent fight over Alejandra Lara. It was a nice old slugfest. The unanimous decision win, though, for Bennett. Lara just couldn't put it together. She had a little bit shorter reach, so she couldn't put the winning strategy together there. Saul Rogers over Georgie Karakamian by unanimous decision. And we had a big knockout. Ben Parrish over Christian Edwards. That was just 38 seconds in their fight. Alex Polizzi over Grant Neal by split decision. And we had a guy named Socrates on this card. Socrates Hernandez. They lost, though, by unanimous decision. So, over Robert Saronio III. And we had another Gracie, Raylan Gracie, losing to Shane Keefe on the undercard by unanimous decision. And we didn't have a Dos Santos, but we have an Edwin De Los Santos beating Jonathan Adams by TKO, body kick and punches. That was the first round knockout, 3 minutes and 29 seconds. Worth mentioning. 4,266. I guess that's it for us, I believe, unless we got any surprise stories you guys got. You've been hiding.
No, I'm actually packing. I'm leaving tomorrow morning at like 4:30 a.m. So.
Where you going?
You're going to be surprised. I'm going down to Wildwood. It's every year. they go down. My friends go down this weekend because they have the annual car show. And last year, my one friend booked his wedding down there that weekend, so it was going to be a combination of wedding and car show. Well, because of COVID, there was no car show, but there was a wedding. That's one where I bled all over the tuxedo because they gave me a switchblade with my name on it, and I cut myself.
Oh, nice.
So that's one of the reasons I don't like wearing gray. So this year, like, that was the first year I ever went with them. They go every year, and they're like, why don't you come down with us, in other years? I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so I took tomorrow off work. So they're like, who's everybody riding with? Some of the people are already there. My one friend, his wife and kid are already there. He came home to work all week, and he's like, yeah, he goes, unfortunately, he goes, I have to drive my vehicle down because other than that, they can't get home. And he goes, and I got a lot of the kids, like, riding mowers and stuff. So he's like, I don't have room to take anybody. Because he goes, I'd love for us to ride together, but I have to drive. Other guys like, oh, even at like 1 in the afternoon, I'm like, dude, Friday, Irish weekend, car show in Wildwood, dude, traffic is going to be insane. I'm leaving at 5 in the morning. In fact, I'm leaving at 4:30 in the morning because I can't stand traffic. I have no patience whatsoever. So if I have a 2-hour drive, I don't want it 2 hours and 10 minutes because of traffic, much less 2 hours and 58 minutes. So I'm going to get up, go down there. No wedding this year. We are going to try to find the guy that crashed last year's wedding and hang out with him. He probably will want nothing to do with us because we are not going to be able to get him free liquor like we did last year. So, but that'll be a little weekend getaway.
Well then. Good luck down there in Wildwood while I'm cutting up Wildwood to deliver to customers for the.
Yeah. It's crazy. Do you think I'm going to fit in Irish weekends?
Oh yeah.
They're going to know I'm a poser. I'll bring me like a soap or something, or shag.
All right, guys. Till next week, I guess. I wish I was actually going to my homecoming. They got a homecoming up in Norwich, but I got too much work to do. So there it is.
I actually just got an email from Ken Cooper last week from Lock Haven that I asked if I could come up for a practice sometime in the next month, and he said, of course, you're always welcome here. Awesome. So I'm going to come in, sit in on a practice, help with some of the team, make a little visit around LHU. Burn up one of my vacation days, do that.
Well, I'll send Riddick Bowe over there so you can scout him for me.
Yeah, right.
All right, guys. See you next week.
Well,
or we'll
have a good night.
Fight.
See you.